My family had a name for what I did. They called it playing pretend. As in she's playing pretend again, said the way you'd say it about a child stacking blocks and calling it architecture. I was 22 the first time I heard my father say it out loud at the dinner table, and 30 when a stranger in a hard hat looked at me across a construction site and said, "Wait, you're the one who designed the Alderton Centre." My father was standing 6 feet behind me. He didn't say a word. He just went very still, the way people do when something they dismissed for years suddenly has a name badge and a handshake. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to where it actually started. To the summer I came home from my second year of architecture school and found out that my family had already decided how my story ended. I grew up in a house where the walls were covered in photos of my brother. Not maliciously, or at least that's what I told myself for years. He was the athlete. He was the one who filled a room when he walked in, the one who got the callbacks and the varsity letters and the kind of easy confidence that photographs well. My parents weren't cruel people. They were just oriented, like a compass that only knew one direction. I was the other one. The one who spent weekends drawing floor plans in the margins of her notebooks. The one who saved up babysitting money to buy drafting pencils. The one who once rearranged the living room furniture at age 13 because the flow was wrong and got grounded for it. My father is a practical man. He worked 30 years in insurance, and he respects things he can calculate. Square footage he understands, deductibles, premiums, risk. What he has never understood is why anyone would spend 5 years in school to learn how to make a building beautiful. Beautiful doesn't pay the mortgage, he told me once, in the particular tone he reserved for things he considered obvious. He wasn't shouting. He never shouted. He just said it the way you'd state a fact about weather. My mother was softer about it, which in some ways was harder. She'd say things like, "I just worry about you, sweetheart, and maybe you could do interior design instead." Something close enough to what I loved that it felt like a consolation prize designed to look like support. My brother never said much. He didn't have to. He had a 4.2 GPA, a full ride to state, and a business degree that my parents talked about at every family function, like it was a second child they'd adopted. I don't blame him for existing. I want to be clear about that. But I do remember the Sunday brunch when he was 25, when my father stood up at the table, stood up like it was a toast, and announced that my brother had just been promoted to regional manager. My aunt started clapping. My mother cried. Someone refilled the mimosas. That same week, I had been accepted into a competitive design fellowship with a firm in Chicago. I'd applied 8 times over 3 years. The acceptance letter was sitting in my bag the whole brunch. I didn't take it out. There's a specific kind of erasure that happens quietly, in increments, until one day you look around and realize your whole outline has been filled in by someone else's assumptions. Mine started when I was 17, when I told my parents I wanted to study architecture. My father's response was to set a newspaper on the table, an actual physical newspaper, folded to the classified section with 3 job listings circled in red pen: bookkeeper, administrative coordinator, dental receptionist. Good hours, he said. Benefits, stability. I didn't fight him then. I just waited. I got a partial scholarship to a program in Chicago. Not the most prestigious school, but it was real, and I had earned it on my own. I wrote the application essays alone at the kitchen table after everyone was asleep. I didn't tell them I was applying. I'd learned by then that showing them something before it was finished only gave them time to talk me out of it. When I got in, I told them at dinner, carefully, like diffusing something. My mother asked how I planned to pay for it. My father asked if I knew the job market for architects. My brother said cool and went back to his phone. The conversation moved on within 4 minutes, I counted. I left for Chicago that fall with 2 suitcases, a drafting kit I'd saved for all summer, and a phone that buzzed exactly once from a family group chat. My mother sending a reminder about my cousin's baby shower, which I was no longer in the state to attend. The first 2 years were hard in the way that quiet things are hard. Not dramatic, just cold. I worked part-time at a coffee shop on North Clark Street, took the cheapest apartment I could find with 2 roommates I'd met on a Facebook group, and spent every non-working hour in the studio. I got good at ignoring hunger and bad at sleeping. I got a lot better at architecture. I called home every week at first, then every 2 weeks. Then, when there was something to say, my mother would ask if I was eating. My father would ask if I'd considered switching to business administration. Still, even now, even after I'd been in school for a year and a half, I stopped mentioning my projects. Not because they weren't going well, but because the questions weren't about my projects. They were always angled toward the same destination. When are you going to be realistic? The fall of my 3rd year, I got a message from the program director. There was a national fellowship, Fully funded, competitive as anything, offered to 2 students per year across the country. She'd submitted my portfolio on my behalf. She said she believed in my work in a way that made me have to sit down after I read the email. I didn't tell my family. I wanted to wait until I heard back. I'd learned that lesson. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until 2 years later, was that they already knew. I found out the way you find out about most things that were done behind your back. By accident, during a conversation about something else entirely. I was home for Thanksgiving my 4th year. My mother had made the green bean casserole nobody liked but everyone ate. We were sitting in the living room after dinner, that specific post-meal fog, when she mentioned offhandedly that she'd handled the college paperwork a while back. What paperwork? I asked. She got that look. The one that means she'd miscalculated, said too much. The fellowship thing, she said. The one your professor submitted you for. I just thought, with the timing, with your brother's graduation coming up, what did you do? She had called the program office. Told them I had decided to withdraw my application due to personal circumstances. She'd done it 6 weeks after it was submitted, before I had any idea I was even being considered. I sat with that for a very long time. I didn't yell. I'd grown past her yelling by then. I just asked, very quietly, why? It would have taken you away for another year, she said. And we didn't think you were ready for that kind of pressure. We, not just her. My father had been part of it. Maybe my brother knew. Maybe he didn't. I still don't know. What I know is that 2 people who were supposed to want good things for me had found something good that was headed my way and quietly redirected it. I drove back to Chicago that night instead of staying the weekend. I didn't sleep until I hit Indiana. I graduated on a Thursday afternoon in May. The ceremony was held in the main auditorium of the university, which had good acoustics and stadium seating and smelled like old wood and nervous people. There were exactly 0 people in the audience there for me. I'd sent my family the date 6 weeks in advance. My father said he'd try. My mother said it was a long drive. My brother had a work thing. My professor was there though. She waved from across the lobby after the ceremony and said, "You should be proud of yourself." I managed to say thank you without my voice doing anything embarrassing. I took myself to a Thai place 2 blocks from campus. I ordered the pad CU and sat at a table by the window and ate the whole thing by myself and thought, this is a good meal, and I earned it, and that is enough for right now. It almost was. I spent the years after graduation building quietly. I joined a mid-sized firm in Chicago, spent 18 months on residential projects, then moved to a firm that worked on public and civic architecture. Libraries, community centres, school renovations. That was where I found my language. Buildings that people move through every day without thinking about them, and that was exactly the point. The best architecture disappears into usefulness. I got promoted twice in 4 years. I started leading my own projects. I moved to a better apartment, the kind with a door that locked properly and a kitchen with counter space. I stopped explaining myself to people who hadn't asked. My family knew I was working. We talked on holidays, sometimes birthdays. My mother sent cards. My father would ask how the drawing job was going, which I stopped correcting him on around year 3. What they didn't know, because I'd stopped volunteering information that would just be minimized, was that I was the project lead on a new public library in a suburb outside Chicago, the Alderton Center. 14 months of work, a $22 million budget, and a design that had been written up in 2 regional architecture publications before the building was even finished. The ribbon cutting was on a Tuesday in October. My father came because my mother told him to. She came because my brother told her she should, and I found out later he said something like it might be good to show up for this one. I don't know what changed for him. Maybe nothing. Maybe just timing. They arrived 15 minutes before the ceremony. My father in his good jacket, the navy one he wore to funerals and important occasions, which meant somewhere he understood this was something. My mother had a small bouquet from the grocery store, the kind in the plastic sleeve, and she held it the way people hold things they're not sure what to do with. I saw them from across the parking lot. I was talking to the city council member and the firm's senior partner, and I felt the exact second my father spotted my name on the event banner. Lead architect, Waverly Hughes. Because his face did something I didn't have words for yet. The ceremony was short, the way good ceremonies are. There were remarks from the city, from the library director, from our firm's senior partner, who said something gracious and accurate about the team. Then the council member asked if I would say a few words. I hadn't prepared anything. That's not a false modesty thing, I genuinely hadn't. But I'd been living inside this building for over a year, and it turned out that was enough. I talked about what it meant to design a space where a 12-year-old could sit in a window seat with a book and feel like the world had room for her. I talked about what public architecture could do when it stopped trying to impress people and started trying to hold them. It was maybe 3 minutes long. When I stopped talking, it was quiet for a second, the specific kind of quiet that means something landed. I stepped back. The council member said something about excellence. A photographer moved in. That's when I heard it. A man in a hard hat, the site foreman, someone I'd worked alongside for months, turned to the firm's project manager standing near him and said loudly enough to carry, "Wait, she's the lead? She designed this whole thing?" And the project manager said, "Yeah, start to finish." I saw my father's face. Not pride exactly, not then. It was more like recalibration, like watching someone adjust a dial they'd set wrong a long time ago and were only now noticing. My mother was crying. Small, quiet tears she kept blotting with the corner of a napkin. My brother was taking a picture of the building on his phone. Nobody said anything to me yet. I was still being pulled into the photo with the council member, still shaking hands. But from the corner of my eye, I could see my father standing very still in his navy jacket, holding the grocery store flowers my mother had handed off to him, looking at the building I had designed, reading my name on the banner. He wasn't making a speech. He wasn't calling anything over. He was just standing there, rearranging something inside himself that had been set the wrong way for 30 years. Afterward, my mother wanted to go to lunch. "There's an Italian place near the library," she said. She'd looked it up. They had good reviews. I said okay. I followed them in my car. We sat in a booth by the window. The place had checkered tablecloths and a bread basket that arrived without asking, and my mother immediately started arranging things the way she does when she's nervous. Salt shaker moved. Napkin folded. "We're proud of you," she said, once the water came. I nodded. I waited. "We always were," she added. I didn't argue with that. There wasn't much point in arguing with something that was partly true and partly a story people tell to make the past feel more manageable. Maybe she had been, in her way, in the parts of her that weren't also scared and limited and oriented toward whatever felt safest. My father hadn't said anything yet. He was reading the menu with the focus of a man who was also thinking about something else entirely. Then he set the menu down. "That's a good building," he said. "Not you did a good job. Not I'm sorry I didn't come to your graduation. Just that's a good building." In the way he'd say, "That's a good car," or "That's a fair price." Matter of fact, the highest register of praise he owned. It was the most he'd ever said about my work in 30 years. I said, "Thank you." And then the bread came and we talked about whether my brother's back was healing and whether my mother's sister was still moving to Phoenix and the ordinary driftwood of family conversation. Nobody mentioned the fellowship. Nobody mentioned the Thanksgiving I'd driven back to Chicago in the dark. I didn't bring it up. Not because I'd forgiven everything, but because I'd made my peace with what kind of accounting this family kept. Some debts don't get settled out loud. Some things just exist, and you decide whether you're going to keep waiting for the apology, or you're going to eat the pasta and drive home and get up the next morning and keep doing the work. I chose the pasta. 3 weeks later, I got an email from a development group in the city. They'd been to the ribbon cutting, or someone from their team had. They were working on a mixed-use building on the near west side. Residential, retail, some community space, and they wanted to know if I'd be interested in meeting. I wrote back the same afternoon. That project became 2 more, and those became a collaboration with a non-profit doing affordable housing design, which led to me being asked to sit on an advisory panel for the city's public spaces initiative. I didn't announce any of it to my family, not out of spite, just because I'd learned a long time ago that the work was the work, and it didn't need an audience to be real. My brother texted me once, after someone he worked with mentioned seeing my name in a city planning document. "Didn't know you were that involved in stuff downtown," he wrote. "Pretty cool." I wrote back, "Thanks." And then after a second, "It's been a good few years," he sent a thumbs up. That was enough, I think. For him and for me. There's a specific thing that happens when you've built your life outside the story someone else wrote for you. You stop waiting for them to rewrite it. You stop needing them to see the full version, because the full version is yours. It lives in the buildings, in the people who sit in the library window seats, in the interns I now take on who remind me of the girl who rearranged the living room furniture at 13 and got grounded for it. I tell them, the impulse that got you in trouble is the same one that's going to get you somewhere. Don't apologize for how your mind works. My father called me last spring, on a Sunday morning in April. That's unusual, he doesn't call generally. My mother calls and sometimes hands him the phone so he can say a few words and hand it back. But this was his number, his voice, right from the start. He said he'd been driving past a library in his part of town, an old one, the Carnegie kind, with the stone steps and the heavy doors. He said he'd never really looked at it before. He sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, looking at it, and then he called me. He didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't say I was wrong to tell you beautiful doesn't matter. He just said, I've been thinking about what you said at the ribbon cutting, about the 12-year-old in the window seat. Yeah, I said. I think I was one of those kids, he said, a long time ago. We sat with that for a moment, the two of us, on a Sunday morning in April, with however many miles and years between us. I know, I said. Because I did know, somewhere, in the way you know things about people you come from. We talked for another 15 minutes about nothing in particular. Before he hung up, he said, Your firm has a website now, right? With pictures of the buildings. I said it did. Your mother wants to show her sister, he said. That was it. That was the whole thing. No dramatic reversal, no tearful reckoning, no scene from a movie. Just a man in a parking lot who finally stopped to look at what a building could do, and then called the person he'd spent 30 years telling it wasn't worth doing. I don't know what to call that exactly. Not forgiveness. That's a word I've gotten suspicious of, because people use it like it means the pain gets returned to sender. It doesn't. What it means, I think, is that you stop letting their version of you live in your chest rent-free. You look at what you built, the actual buildings, and also the life, and also the person, and you decide that is the real record. Not what they said at dinner, not what they circled in a newspaper. I used to think I needed them to say my name like it meant something. I don't anymore. The buildings say to it fine.